Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL Round 13 betting trends preview. Plus, we're also going to go through Game 1 of State of Origin, and I want to share with you one of the new tools that I've added to the bet finders in the NRL, where you can analyze team splits of how they perform in different situations. Now we're 12 rounds through the season. This weekend we have 7 games, and the first thing I want to share with you guys is it's really important that you wait until lineups are out, particularly for all the teams who have players backing up from State of Origin and knowing whether those players are going to play, as they can be like late withdrawals. So I recommend you do a lot of your betting closer to game time this weekend and not make as many early bets. That same principle applies for try scorers, as you might be able to find even better matchups if certain players don't play for their sides, particularly on the edges. That being said, I'm going to run through the games for round 13 first. We're going to look at the betting history between the two teams, who's been winning, who's been covering, and have their games been going over or under the total, and some recent trends on their performances. And we'll start with the Dragons versus Knights to be played on Friday night. The men's State of Origin on the Wednesday, women's on the Thursday, and then Dragons Knights, the lone game on Friday night. Dragons currently favourites $1.50 minus 5.5. The total for this game is 43.5 points. Newcastle have won and covered 4 of the past 6 versus the Dragons, and those 4 wins that the Knights have had across the past 6 meetings have all been by at least 20 points. They met once last season, which was in round 5 at Newcastle, and the Knights won that game 30-10 as $1.52 favourites, basically the same price that the Dragons are in this game at home. Prior to that, they met in round 27 at St. George's home, and the Knights won that game 32-12. In the 2021 and 2022 meetings, the Dragons won those games by 5 and 9 points, and then back in 2020, round 19, the Knights won 42-18. Newcastle had their biggest win of the season last week, beating the Panthers 25-6. They were without Kalen Ponga in that game, and he'll likely be backing up from Origin this week and be in the side. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they can replicate that. Their previous win to the one from last week was against the Rabbitohs back in round 9, Magic Round in Brisbane. The Knights won that game 30-4. They followed that up with what, for majority of the game, particularly the first half, was a good performance. They were up 20-0 on the Titans, but let the Titans come back and ultimately lost that game, conceding 24 unanswered points and losing by 4. So they backed up their last win with a decent performance, but just couldn't put a full 80 minutes together. And so they get another opportunity here to back that up. Their earlier win in the season was back in round 1. They beat the Tigers and then followed that up with a win over the Dolphins in round 2. The Dragons are a little bit short here. They had the bye last week. The Dragons are only impacted by Origin through Valentine Holmes, so they'll mostly be close enough to full strength. But I just currently think the odds are just a little bit too far apart between the two sides. I don't want to make too much off the nice performance last week against a real undermanned Panthers side. I just think the Dragons should more so be $1.65 to $1.70 in this game, not all the way down to $1.50. In terms of the total, it's currently at 43.5. 7 of the past 10 between these two sides have gone under the total. For the Knights, their last 5 games have gone under, and they are 10-1 to the under overall on the season. And for the Dragons, they come into this game off that bye, but 3 of their 4 games prior went over the total. However, prior to that, they had games more so going under. They currently sit on the season 5 games under, 5 games over the total. At 43.5, I do think it is slightly high, and more around the 40 mark is probably the fair number for this game. So I'd lean towards the under between these two teams. Newcastle struggle to score, but more so they have bigger issues against top opponents, not necessarily other sides that are outside the top 8 like the Dragons. The first game on Saturday, the Titans at home to the Melbourne Storm. The Storm, $1.33 favourites, minus 10.5, and the total is 48.5. Melbourne have a great record over Gold Coast. They've won 10 of the past 11 games, But the Titans have covered the past 6. Last season, they just met one time. The Storm won that game on the Gold Coast, 22-20. That was in round 9. Of the last 5 meetings, the Storm have been around the $1.10 mark in 4 of them. The only exception was the round 3 meeting in 2023, where the Storm were $1.47, and that was the game that the Titans actually won, 38-34. In terms of the betting on this game, I did expect to see the Storm a little bit shorter and the Titans longer for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Melbourne haven't been great on the road this season. Their record in away games, I'll quickly run through the results here for you. So last week, the game prior to the bye, they played the Sharks. They lost by 5. That was at Shark Park. They played the Raiders in Brisbane, lost that game 20-18. They played the Dolphins in Brisbane. They lost 42-22. That's their last 3 road games. Then they played the Seagulls in Manly, won that game 48-24. Prior to that, lost to the Dragons in Sydney 14-8. So of their 5 away games, they have lost 4 of them. But the main factor here is the Storm rarely ever lose 2 games in a row. They've had the bye to prepare. They were jumped from the get-go by the Sharks a couple of weeks ago. Don't expect that to happen here against the Titans. So I do think the Storm will win, but I did expect like a bit more value for the Titans because the Titans haven't been covering spreads at all pretty much this season. You can say the same thing for the Melbourne Storm as well, but Titans have failed to cover 6 of their last 7. They've lost 6 of their last 7 games. The only win against the Knights, where they came from 20 points down in that game. But even though they're at home, I still think the Storm will get over the top of the Titans and win. You obviously want to be sure of the players backing up. The Storm have 5 players involved in Origin, particularly Xavier Coates, Cameron Munster. You also have Harry Grant, so those 3 are really important players. Trent Loiero on the bench for Queensland, and then Stefano Manu is in the reserves for the Blues. Expect majority of those players to back up. Would be surprised if at least 4 of the 5 don't play in this game. And with that, the Storm should get over the line. Tino and Fotuaika in the front row for Queensland. Don't know how good they'll be by Saturday, depending on the physicality of this Origin game compared to those other players for the Storm that won't be involved in that. So I think that takes away from the Titans a little bit. But assuming those players back up for Melbourne, expect they'll win this game. The total is 48.5. 3 of the past 5 between these 2 teams have gone over. The Titans, 3 of their last 4 games have gone over the total. And for the Melbourne Storm, they've had 5 of their last 7 games go over the total. And they've only had 3 go under across the entire season. Storm off a loss, score a lot of points. We're going to cover that a bit in the split section, but I'd lean towards this game going over, assuming conditions are good on the Gold Coast on Saturday, which there is a little bit of rain around, and that's just the one thing that you need to keep an eye on. But for this game, pay attention to lineups, pay attention to weather for your total bets. Cowboys versus Tigers. Cowboys favorites here, $1.42, minus 7.5, and the total is 48.5 as well for this game. Cowboys have won and covered the past 3 versus the Tigers. Coming into this game, North Queensland are off the bye after losing to the Seagulls at home last week. They haven't won a game since round 8 against the Titans, so 2 losses and a draw across their past 3. Also haven't led at half time since back in round 6 against the Rabbitohs. So Cowboys have been forced to do it the tough way, chase teams down in order to win games. In fact, they've only led at half time in 2 games across the whole season. And then for the Tigers, they're off back-to-back losses prior to their bye against the Rabbitohs and the Storm. Majority of the games, they've been in front or tied at halftime, but the games against Rabbitohs and Storm, they have trailed. Important game here for both sides, considering where they're sitting in terms of the current season, on the ladder and those kind of things. Based off last year's performances with the Cowboys winning 48-30 and 42-28, plus then you go back to round 18, 2023, and it was the Cowboys 74-0. You'd have to lean towards the Cowboys winning this game. However, I think the Tigers are well within a chance here and can't fully underestimate them. And I think they can keep it close. If we could get this line out to closer to the 10 mark, then definitely be happy to be involved. Cowboys just need to make sure Tom Dearden backs up from Origin. That's the most important factor here for the Cowboys. But they also have Ruben Cotter and Jeremiah Nanai involved in the Origin team. So it could be hit hard by this game, which may impact their performance this week. But Dearden's obviously your most important one, just as controlling that team in the halves, and expect he will play against the Tigers. But somewhat like the Tigers here, as an underdog, I think the value lies slightly with them. Cowboys haven't exactly been at their best the past month, and even though they're at home here, I do give the Tigers a shot of going up there and maybe not winning this game, but definitely keeping it close. The total at 48.5. The past 6 games between these two sides have gone over. For the Tigers, 6 of their last 9 games have gone over the total. And for the Cowboys, 3 of their last 4 have gone over. Cowboys, to win this game, they need to get back to scoring, which they couldn't do against the following that game against Parramatta. So whether that's like a bit of a concern on the Cowboys' form. They also only drew with the Panthers, who were terrible against the Knights following as well. Just Cowboys' recent form isn't filling you with a lot of confidence for a side to be $1.42. And like when you look at their wins against Titans, Rabbitohs, Panthers, and then Raiders, they're the only 4 teams they beat. Obviously, the Raiders win really good, but outside of that, their other performances haven't been great. They're back to conceding over 24 points a game in each of their last 3. So yeah, that's the reasons I give the Tigers a shot in this game. Seagulls versus Broncos. In terms of the total there, I'd lean towards the over, but largely depends on how the Cowboys attack turns up. Seagulls versus Broncos. These sides haven't played down in Manly since round 21, 2014. Broncos, their record at the venue, they've lost 11 of their past 15 games there, with 1 draw in there as well, so just 3 wins from their past 15. However, I'm pretty sure none of the current Broncos lineup have played games for the Broncos at 4 Pines Park, so can't really add too much to that. But obviously, home venue, compared to a lot of games, the home venue here means a lot more. Seagulls are favourites, $1.65, minus 3.5. The total is 45.5. Broncos have won the last 3 versus Manly, but Seagulls have covered 3 of the past 4. They met once last season, round 11. Broncos won by 1 point, 13-12. Prior to that, the Broncos won 32-6 and 38-0 in the 2 clashes across 2023 and 2022. Last time Seagulls won was round 10, 2021. 50 points to 6. Generally, this is the Magic Round clash. It's a Seagulls home game, but the Broncos are playing at Suncorp. With this game being in Manly, I think this evens it up a lot for both sides. However, Manly you never really know what you're going to get. Cherry Evans should back up for Origin. That's the key factor here for the Seagulls. They've lost 2 of their past 3 games since the bye, losing against the Sharks and Parramatta. They have the Broncos, Knights, Titans over the next 3 weeks before their next bye. This is the key period for Manly. They have 5 wins on the season. They have 6 losses. They need to win these 3 games to get themselves really back into contention as a genuine top 8 side. If they lose 2 of these 3 games or go 0-3, then their season's probably done. So this is a key period here. They also have the Tigers and Rabbitohs following that. So they have an opportunity here to build up. But at home, I think the Seagulls can, with Cherry Evans back in the side, I thought they'd be able to give themselves a shot at beating the Eels last week, but they just were awful in attack, had lots of opportunities, but had no organisation. So if Cherry Evans is out, Broncos likely win. If he's in the side, Manly can win here at home. Both these sides are extremely hard to trust. So for me personally, I'm just going to be very cautious of how I approach betting in this game, because Manly are up and down. Broncos, their last month and a half has been awful. They pulled a really good performance basically out of nowhere to beat the Bulldogs on a quick turnaround coming back from New Zealand, but since then have been awful and have been comfortably outscored by the opposition. They're off the bye for their first bye this season. They're on the road. They have been fairly good on the road this season and been competitive in the majority of games that they had. They went down to Sydney, hammered the Roosters. They were competitive against the Raiders, only losing by 10 points in Canberra, then only losing by 2 points in Golden Point against the Warriors over there, and then lost the game. They had a lead against the Rabbitohs, 14-0 I think it was, and Rabbitohs scored 22 unanswered points to come back and win. So the Broncos have potentially been a bit better on the road than they've been at home. They've led at halftime in 3 of their last 4 games. Think this is going to be a real close game. Don't think there's much between these two sides. I'll be looking at try bets here. Last time they met, it was only a 1-point margin. Think we'll see at most 10-point margin in this game either way. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone under the total. The current total is 45.5, which I do think is potentially a touch low. However, both these teams have a strong history of going under this season. Broncos, 6 of their last 9 games have gone under, and the Eagles, their last 6 games have gone under the total. So I can definitely see why the bookmakers have made this total just a little bit lower, because they need these teams to start putting some overs on the board and not just every game going under. A few of them have been proving to be so far this season. So in terms of total, I'd probably stay away from it in this game, because I don't think if it goes over, it's probably not going to go over by much. And if it goes under, it's probably not going to go under by much either. Rabbitohs versus Warriors. The Warriors are favourites here, $1.75, -1.5. The total is 45.5. The Warriors coming off their 3rd loss of the season. Their other 2 losses, they've bounced back with wins. They bounced back from the loss to Canberra, beating the Eels 36-16, and they bounced back from the loss to the Storm, beating the Broncos 20-18. If they can replicate that here against the Rabbitohs side, who's currently the 2nd worst attacking side in the competition, they can keep that trend going. However, the Rabbitohs have a really good record against the Warriors. They've won 8 of the past 9, and have been able to grind out wins in a lot of low-scoring games this season. All 11 Rabbitohs games have gone under the total, hence the reason they're winning more than 50% of games. They have a 6-5 record, but only averaging 16.5 points a game. They did have a bit of a lull period where they only scored 36 points across 4 games and lost all 4, but in their wins, they're only scoring in the low 20s most of the time. Expect this to be a pretty low-scoring game, even though the matchup has a history of going over, 10 of the past 12 head-to-head going over. The key factor for this game is whether Latrell Mitchell plays for the Rabbitohs. Expect he does, and that's going to be the key factor. Warriors back on the road after playing at home last week, losing in a close game against the Raiders. Expect this to be another really close game. There's not much between these two sides. Warriors rarely win by big margins, neither do the Rabbitohs. This is just about the perfect try-bet game. And also, in terms of the total, at 45.5, I am surprised with this number. I do think it's maybe even 5 points too high. This is probably one number where it looks significantly too high for how these teams have been going. As I said, Rabbitohs, every game's gone under the total, and Warriors, we'll have a look at their trends. 5 of their last 6 games have gone under the total. So I can run the numbers, which I'll cover in the Best Bets preview, which is through the description. You can view that. But we'll go through and see how many times this season teams have actually scored 46 or more points in a game. Guarantee it's not going to be many. And I think the way these teams set up, they're both strong-ish defenses, both ranking in the top 8. And in terms of attack, they're both bottom 4 attacking sides. In terms of points conceded, both averaging under 20 points a game. Strong lean towards the under, even though there's a history of games going over. Their previous meetings, the Warriors won 34-4. That was the one meeting last year in round 5. The one meeting in round 18, 2023, the Rabbitohs won 28-6. But expect we see a really close game. I'm leaning slightly to the Warriors and think the market's probably spot on around the $1.75, $1.80 mark, but not with a huge amount of confidence to back them. I think this game will come down to a specific play, a call, just something that'll just edge one team over the line. Panthers versus Eels. Penrith, $1.58 favourites, -4.5. The total is 44.5. These sides have split the past 4 meetings. Panthers have won the last 2. Parramatta won the 2 games prior to that. They responded. So in 2022, the Panthers beat the Eels in the grand final. Then in 2023, Parramatta won both meetings against Penrith. Definitely got their revenge there. Last season, though, Panthers won by 2 and by 8 points. Parramatta have covered 3 of the past 4 versus Penrith, so they've definitely made the recent games a contest. This is a really good game that also depends on who backs up from Origin. You obviously have a number of players for the Panthers, the main one being Nathan Cleary and Isaiah Yeo. Also, Liam Martin in the Panthers side and Brian Toho, Dylan Edwards, a number of players that all fit into this New South Wales team that Penrith will need to play in order to even beat Parramatta. As we saw last week, they are awful against the Knights. Without all those players, has had absolutely nothing in attack. And this game really hinges on whether those players back up. Mitch Moses is the key factor. You could also add Zach Lomax in there as well for the Eels. If Moses Cleary, they'll be teammates on Wednesday night and then opposition in the game on the weekend. But this is a game we can't bet into until knowing if all those players are backing up, as both of their teams hinge strongly on them. To be honest, if Cleary doesn't play, then I think Eels will get over the line. If Moses doesn't play, then I think the Panthers can get the win. If everyone backs up and everyone's good to go and both teams are at full strength as they can be, I think this is a game that'll come down to the wire. Like, these sides have a history of having close matches, even though you could say, like last year, they were worlds apart. Parramatta let the Panthers hammer them, and Penrith aren't hammering anybody this season. So leading into this game, Penrith lost last week. Prior to their bye, they drew against the Cowboys. They put a couple of wins near each other against the Broncos and Roosters and split that with a loss against the Seagulls. They've only covered the spread in 2 of their last 8 games. For the Panthers also, they've had 6 of their last 8 games go under the total. And for the Eels, they definitely turned a corner. They put together back-to-back wins. They've won 4 of their past 7 games. Close losses against the Dolphins, Sharks, and were blown out by the Raiders up in Darwin. Their last 4 games have gone under the total. The way this game sets up, I think we'll see a fairly low scoring, close game. Do think currently there is a bit of value with the Eels. Panthers and I think really with them under this $1.60 mark that they're consistently being priced, I'm just not seeing a great deal of value in as the season continues to progress, even against sides like Parramatta, where last season, round 23, the Panthers were $1.14 favourites. Prior to that, they're $1.37. I think the right price for this game is the Panthers, $1.75, $1.80, and the Eels around that $2.05 mark. So see slight value, assuming both sides play, everyone backs up with the Eels. And then final game of the round, Roosters versus Raiders. Raiders, small favourites here, $1.82, minus 1.5, and the total is 46.5. The Roosters, after a pretty bad start to the season, losing 4 of their first 5 games, have turned it around, winning 5 of their past 7 games. They've led at halftime in each of their past 4. They're the most informed attacking side over the last month. They've beaten the Sharks and a close loss to the Bulldogs in a winnable position, and wins against the Dolphins and Dragons across their past 4 games. They've covered the spread in each of those games as well. Statistically, though, the Raiders are the better side so far this season. Canberra come into this game beating the Warriors over in New Zealand last week. They've now won 7 of their last 8 games and covered the spread in 7 of their last 8. Do agree Canberra should be favourite. The away team has a good record in this matchup as well, covering 10 of the past 12. Raiders have won and covered 3 of the past 4 versus Roosters. Last season, the Raiders won by 2 points in round 26, and the Roosters won 44-16 back in round 12. I think whoever wins this game is probably going to be by a small margin, but in terms of a bet in this game, I prefer the total. So it's currently set at 46.5, which I think is a few points too low. Raiders are the number 2 attacking side, averaging 27.8, and that number skyrockets against lower tier opposition. And the Roosters are averaging 24.4, but as I said, they're the number 1 informed scoring side right now. Both sides are in the bottom half in terms of defensive numbers, and so I think we'll see plenty of points in this game, even though 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone under the total. Raiders, 2 of their past 3 games have gone over. Just the game last week against the Warriors went under. However, it was terrible conditions that they are playing in. And for the Roosters, 4 of their last 5 games have gone over the total. So expect a high-scoring game there to close out the round, assuming good conditions. And also, obviously, we'd like to see any Origin players like Hudson Young for the Raiders to ensure that he backs up. Lindsay Collins is playing off the bench for Queensland. He should be in the side. And then you also have Angus Crichton in there for the Roosters. There are a number of Roosters players in the side that obviously you want playing this game. Robert Toya as well to ensure we get points off the bench. Connor Watson, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters as well. So there are a number of Roosters players involved in the Origin. So definitely make sure you keep an eye on the teams for that. So that's my early look at the games from this weekend. And one thing, so in the NRL best bets, you get access to all the bet finder tools, and in there you can compare teams using the main matchup tab. So this right here allows you to compare teams based on their season performance, so their attack rankings, their defense rankings, and where that stacks up. So this is what they're averaging per season. That's for the Dragons. This category shows you where that ranks in terms of the overall league. If they're ranking high in those categories, obviously you know they're, for example, the Dragons average the most line breaks of any side. Knights averaging the least number of points per game. And I built this a number of years ago now. This particular one, minus all the updates that have been over the years, started just over 10 years ago. But it's evolved to make it really easy to analyze where team strengths and weaknesses are, not only against this particular opponent, but in terms of the overall league. Now, we're to round 13. I've added the splits matchup tab to the NRL best bets, so you can access this through the description. I want to run through it with you though, because this is really valuable to analyze team performances to see where their strengths are. So for every single team, you can go through and see all the different teams in there. You can break down their attacking stats based on the season and the last 4 games, so to see which teams are in form when they're playing top 8 or bottom 9 teams, home games, away games, day, night, in good conditions, in wet conditions, on short rest, on 7 or more days rest, games after they won last week or games after they lost last week, games when they're a favorite, a home or away favorite, games where they're an underdog, a home or away underdog, and then games based on the day of the week, and see what they average in terms of their stats in games that they've won and games that they lost. So you see Broncos, when they win, they score 36.8 points on average, but when they lose, they only score 17.3. That kind of seems obvious, but you can see the major discrepancies between different situations for teams, and then you can use this in your betting analysis and use it to make a lot smarter bets. Because, for example, Broncos in day games are only averaging 17 points, whereas in night games they're averaging 28.2. And a lot of that is coming in the first half, whereas second halves in day games they're only scoring 7 points on average. Particularly this one. This is one that kind of goes against the general trend. Generally, when teams play the top sides, they average less in a lot of their attacking numbers and also defensive numbers. However, this season, Broncos are doing the exact opposite of that. They're averaging 34 points against top sides and only 21.7 against bottom 9 teams. But this is how you can go through, analyze different situations. Then you have all the defensive stats. You can also use the try-score analysis tool to see different situations that potentially stand out. Also tries conceded, so in certain situations are they conceding many more tries than other situations. And then for your total points betting, you can compare, is a team like really on the rise? So right now the game totals season compared to the last 4 is pretty much on par, but their first halves are averaging slightly more, second halves averaging slightly more compared to the last 4 games. You can go through and find some really good angles. And when you can find situations where both match up, so you can have a situation where 2 teams in their last 4 games are both dramatically exceeding their first half points, and now they're going up against each other, you can attack the first half total points market. And the same principle goes, like for example, the Raiders against top 8 teams are only averaging 17 points. That's why I wanted to mention this since they're playing the Roosters this week, whereas against bottom 9 teams, they're averaging 33.3 points a game. And defensively, their defensive numbers are also significantly better against bottom 9 teams compared to top 8 teams. One thing also to look at, like obviously we know Raiders score a lot of tries through the second row, but majority of the time it's against the bottom sides. That number's also dropped off across their past 4 games compared to what it is on the season. As you can see, like the amount of information here is endless, and you can break it down in so many ways. There's also the rankings tab, so all these different metrics you can go through and compare teams of how they're stacking up. So what I do when analyzing games is keep an eye on where teams are stacking up in different situations. So in the last 4 games, Storm and Roosters well clear of everyone else in terms of average margin. Eels, other side, currently in 3rd. Knights have also in 5th position. First half sides, Roosters, Knights, Broncos, the 3 top sides. Whereas, for example, Broncos in recent times, they're the 3rd best first half side and the worst second half team. Then your game total points over the last 4 games. As mentioned, like the Rabbitohs and Warriors are playing each other this week. Over the past 4 weeks, or over their past 4 games, they're both ranking third last and last in terms of game total points, particularly in the second half, where Warriors are averaging 13.8 and the Rabbitohs only 18.5. So this is a good situation to potentially target second half unders in the game for the Rabbitohs Warriors. This is what I love about betting is you don't need to just bet on your gut feeling. You don't need to just bet on randomness or something that you remember or just what you think is going to happen. Every single betting decision you can make, you want to be able to back up with actual tangible information, and that's what this allows you to do. So you can also go through and analyze the rankings against top 8 teams or bottom 9 teams and different situations after teams won last week or after they lost last week. All these tabs are all in the Best Bets membership through the link in the description for you to use for your analysis throughout the rest of the season. Definitely check it out if you love using stats to find your bets on the NRL. Now, Wednesday night, so tomorrow, the State of Origin is on. Queensland at home against New South Wales, so they'll be playing at Suncorp Stadium. Currently, New South Wales are about $1.65 favourites. $1.64 is currently the price on Sportsbet. Going to run through how I approach betting on State of Origin and some of the factors you can consider before putting your bets on. So the first thing I do with Origin, which is not something I do for general other games, but particularly for Origin, is I want to get a real clear image of how these teams make up and then also how it compares to previous games, because there's no real use looking at last year's results or previous results without being able to determine what the differences are in the sides. So first of all, looking at the lineups, Dylan Edwards stays at fullback for the Blues. Kalen Ponga comes in to replace Reece Walsh at fullback for Queensland. Not sure why Queensland don't have team shots in the Queensland jerseys and they're all in their club jerseys. It's a little bit weird. Then on the wings, Xavier Coates and Valentine Holmes for Queensland, Brian Toho and Zach Lomax, the wingers. That's all pretty same as last season. Stephen Crichton and Latrell Mitchell in the centres for the Blues. And then Robert Toya comes in with Hamiso Tap in the centres for Queensland. Now, looking at the back five of both sides, I think the strength really does lie with the Blues here when you look at how these players match up against each other. I think in terms of attacking ability, the Queensland side's probably got a little bit more flashiness and can produce crazy plays that turn into tries a little bit more. But in terms of defense, work rate, and just power, the Blues have them covered in that area. So I like the Blues back five a little bit more. In the halves, Cam Munster comes in, who didn't play last year for Queensland, and partners with Daly Cherry Evans. And then Mitch Moses goes to 5'8". He played the last game last season. Cleary comes back in, so Jerome Luai out of the Blues side. In terms of the halves, like Mitch Moses and Nathan Cleary are both halfbacks, so Moses needs to go into 5'8". The Blues have won their last 3 games with Moses in the team. There's people out there that are like Cleary, the Panthers are on the bottom of the ladder. Like, is he out of form? I think that's largely due to the Panthers team as a whole. And in terms of how these players match up against each other, I think as long as Moses and Cleary work well together and complement each other as opposed to both trying to do the same thing, like the advantage Queensland have with Munster and Cherry Evans is they both have very different game styles, where Moses and Cleary are both very similar. But as long as they can complement each other, I think that'll be good enough for the Blues to set them up to score a winning score in this game. Forward pack, I think the Queensland side have the stronger front row in Fotuaika and Tino, and then Harry Grant at hooker. Keep in mind, Queensland have never won with Harry Grant in the side. So as much as probably the better dummy half in this game over Reece Robson, it's not like absolutely it makes a huge advantage for Queensland. But I just think Queensland have the stronger front row, but in terms of second row, in Liam Martin, Angus Crichton and Zaire Yeo, that's a lot stronger than the second row of Ruben Cotter, Jeremiah Nanai and Patrick Carrigan. I think there's a massive difference here in the second row between the two sides. So of the starting 13, I really give the edge to the Blues overall team. The bench, I also think the Blues probably have the stronger and more impactful bench and the players that can make a bigger impact when they come on the field, like particularly your Hudson Young and Spencer Leniu and those players coming on. I don't think the Blues are going to lose too much in the forward pack. with those players coming on, where I do think Queensland drop away a little bit more. So in terms of lineups, I think the Blues have the stronger lineup, particularly compared to what they fielded last year. Now, looking at last year's results, Queensland won game 1 38-10 down in New South Wales. However, keep in mind this was the game where Joseph Swahilihi was sent off in the 8th minute, and New South Wales had to play 72 minutes with only 12 players on the field. So don't look at this scoreline 38-10 and think, well, Queensland absolutely hammered them in that game, because extenuating circumstances, as soon as you get a send-off in this kind of game, the other team is winning. Game 2, New South Wales flew out of the blocks in this game. So just quickly show you the matchup. Tabuai-Fidow scored 3 tries. Ben Hunt scored 2. Xavier Coates scored. It was 20-6 at halftime. Then in game 2, this game was down at the MCG. New South Wales won 38-18, and it was 34-0 at halftime. So New South Wales really came out, made a statement. The Luai and Mose were in the halves for the Blues in that game. So a very similar team to what they're fielding here. A couple of changes in the front row and second row, but overall just a very similar side. But this game was really one of those games where New South Wales wanted to make a statement after what happened in game 1. And then game 3 was at Suncorp, and New South Wales won 14-4. Queensland didn't score a try in this game. Their 4 points came from 2 penalty goals through Valentine Holmes. New South Wales scored 2 tries and plus a penalty goal to get their 14 points. Both sides had a sin bin as well in that game. So looking at last series, the fact that Queensland didn't even score a try in the lone game, the halftime score was 2-0 in favour of Queensland, so both tries coming late in the game. This definitely concerns me, and as I said, like, the Blues overall team definitely on paper looks stronger, but Queensland just have a little bit more flair. But if this game turns into a grind, I think the Blues can get over the line. I think at the $1.65, there's not a huge amount of value in their current price with the game being played in Queensland. In my opinion, if this was in Sydney, the Blues would probably be around the $1.60, $1.55 mark. So I don't think there's quite enough taken into account for this game being at Suncorp. However, like, Queensland rarely ever lose 2 games in a row effectively, like going back to last series at Suncorp. But they're definitely under the pump of being able to win this game based on how the teams match up and also what happened last year. The key factor obviously is there was no Munster last year and no Cleary last year. Those 2 players come back in, majorly strengthened both teams. But in game 1, how I'm looking at approaching this, I think the Blues likely win the game or only lose by a small margin. And it's a really close game with a 1 score, no more than 10 points either way. And as I can't see, it'd be pretty embarrassing game 1 of the season for Queensland to lose by double digits. And then in terms of score in this game, I think we'll see a low scoring contested first half and then a low scoring overall game. The current total is 39.5, which I think is maybe 1 to 2 points too high. But generally what they do is they set the number higher in these games because they know everyone's just going to back the overs regardless of whatever number they put up. So generally these matches, the total is slightly too high than what it should be. So I'm leaning towards unders. One other thing, I personally don't have a major allegiance towards Queensland or New South Wales. Like, I always lived in Queensland my whole life, but don't follow like Brisbane or Queensland team in the NRL and don't follow a Brisbane or Gold Coast team in the AFL. So those kind of loyalties in terms of teams and location don't really matter. In terms of state of origin, the thing that I care about the most is that it's a really good, entertaining game and a good contest without too much like sin bins and that kind of stuff to get involved. But looking through like the previous series, so Queensland won game 1 last year. They also won game 1 in 2023 in Adelaide. They won game 1 16-10 in Sydney in 2022. New South Wales won 50-6 in 2021. That was up in Townsville. Queensland won 18-14 in 2020 in Adelaide. Queensland won 18-14 in Brisbane. Game 1 2019. And then game 1 2018, New South Wales won 22-12 in Melbourne. So going back through the past 6-7 years, Queensland do have a really good record in game 1 of the series. But I just think the way they performed last year, New South Wales are primed to win this game. I think it'll be a bit of a disappointment if they were to lose. Now, try scorers for this game. Because I think it's going to be a low scoring game, it's not one where I think you can set up like multis with 3, 4, 5, 6 try scorers and expect they're all going to hit. I think both sides will be at the 3 tries or less factor. And in terms of players to score a try in this game, the most likely try scorer I think is going to be Latrell Mitchell. He has scored in his last 4 Origin games a total of 5 tries during that period, and he matches up against Rabbitohs in this game defensively. So Rabbitohs, this is his first season in the NRL, first Origin. Expect the Blues to target him dramatically. And based on how the teams are listed, Brian To'o expected to be on the outside of Latrell Mitchell, so he'd be the second selection. Currently, Latrell Mitchell slightly longer odds, so I'd have him as my first try scorer option, and then Brian To'o as the second try scorer option. And outside of that, there's no other major ones. I think that's more of a tactical strategy that New South Wales will go up. In terms of try scorers for Queensland, there's none that I could strongly identify as I think that player is likely to score a try. And obviously, in these games, there's very little historical information of, where teams score tries as the players change from game to game and year to year compared to clubland. Tabuai-Fidow has a really good record at scoring in Origin, scored in 4 of his last 5 Origin games, but definitely has his work cut out for him matching up against Stephen Crichton defensively. But I do think Queensland will go to that side of the field of Tabuai and Valentine Holmes more often than towards Toya and Xavier Coatswing, particularly to target like Zach Lomax on the edges. He's probably the option you're more likely to break down than Brian To'o's wing on the other side. So I'd be leaning towards Tabuai-Fidow and Holmes as the more likely try scorers for Queensland, but the only one that I'd probably be backing is Latrell Mitchell at around the $22.50 mark. So that's how I'm looking at Origin. I'll be posting a full State of Origin preview in the NRL Best Bets membership, which you can access through the link in the description. And also that's where I post all my bets on the NRL throughout the season. Plus you can view all the tools to analyze the different splits of how teams perform, plus 20 other, I think there's close to 30 different analysis tools now in there for the NRL that you can use to research games and make sure where you're investing your money is the best possible place. Because to make money betting, you just want to make sure every bet you're putting on has strong reasoning behind it. And if you follow proper bankroll management alongside that, it'll go a very long way towards you making money from betting and not donating to the betting companies. That being said, good luck with your bets on the Origin and on round number 13 of the NRL. The try score video will be posted tomorrow as well, going through all the games for the weekend and the most likely try scorers based off stats. So I'll see you guys in that video. Thanks for watching, thanks for following on the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.